welcome to Music Mania. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today we have a pretty stacked week of music listening ahead of us. And, well, I guess reviewing would be the correct term. I've already listened to all this stuff. I would say this week has probably been the best week for music releases for me thus far because, well, a couple of the albums that came out, you already know, they were in the title and the thumbnail, Whitechapel and Spiritbox. Let's just say they didn't disappoint, and they're actually pretty high up in my personal rankings for the year. But with all that being said, there's not much time to waste at the beginning of this video, so let's jump on over and start talking about the new albums that released this week. First off, I'm going to talk about Hymns and Dissonance by Whitechapel, which was fantastic. Absolutely loved this piece. Now, my opinion of Whitechapel is probably not something that a lot of the longtime fans is going to love, mainly because The Valley back in 2019 was one of my major gateway albums for deathcore as a genre, and I personally really like clean vocals and music, even in deathcore, if they are incorporated properly and to a satisfying degree. I think Whitechapel's inclusion of clean vocals has largely been satisfying. I didn't really listen to Kin very much. Pretty sure I only listened to that one time all the way through. The Valley I haven't listened to for several years. Whitechapel as a whole I haven't really listened to a whole ton, as opposed to like Fit for an Autopsy or some of my favorite deathcore bands. But I always have to appreciate Whitechapel for what they did for me getting into the genre. Hymns and Dissonance going back to a heavier style, while would not have been a very good thing for me, getting back into the genre, or me getting into the genre if that were happening like this year as an example. I needed The Valley when I needed it in order to get into this type of music, but Hymns and Dissonance was a great, super heavy return to form for this band. I really loved Hymns and Dissonance. It was fantastic. I listened to this yesterday. Like, genuinely amazing. I very highly recommend Hymns and Dissonance because it's bouncy, it's groovy, it's great. Phil still kills it. Copy and paste my review from over here because it was just splendid. And then let's type out my standout tracks. And quite frankly, doing my standout tracks for this album was pretty difficult because just about every single one of these songs could have been standout. Let's put it this way, to really sell you on how much I enjoyed Hymns and Dissonance, I'm pretty sure I said it somewhere in the review proper itself, but the title track, Hymns and Dissonance, was up to this point my favorite single of the year, and yet it is not even a part of my standout tracks list for the album. So that in and of itself should tell you just how much I really loved this record. I'm pretty sure it's my album of the year so far. I think it's great. And instead of just repeating myself another 15 times and saying the same thing over and over again, that is going to be my brief review of this. If you want to check out the written review, you can check out my Musicboard profile in the description below. But moving on, we're going to go into the next major release for this week. That is Tsunami Sea by Spiritbox, which I also really enjoyed. I have a love-hate relationship with Spiritbox. I haven't listened to all of their stuff, but I've listened to quite a bit of it. And my opinion isn't necessarily with the majority here. I think a lot of people really love Spiritbox, think they're the best thing since sliced bread, basically, but they've never been really my favorite. They have standout tracks that I really adore, but overall full releases never really click with me the way that I want them to. I would say Eternal Blue, for example, as an album, I just don't like very much. There's a few songs that I love, but as a complete package, I've listened to that album like 2 or 3 times and not really liked it any of those times beyond the tracks that I really loved. The Fear of Fearback, their most recent EP before Tsunami Sea, was sort of a turnaround. There was still the track or two on there that I wasn't like the hottest on, but overall as an EP I did actually really enjoy that. That was starting to see some of the tide turn a little bit for me, even though my opinions on the best or worst songs on there probably hot takes compared to most other listeners of the EP. Tsunami Sea continues that trend of being more something that I personally really enjoy, even though it sounds really similar to both the last EP and the last album. It's not necessarily doing anything super new, but it's doing it in a way that I'm clicking with a little bit more often. The blend and balance of the heavier moments and the softer, more beautiful moments was much better this time around. The only thing that I didn't really like very much about Tsunami Sea, or that I don't like basically at all is Crystal Roses. It's kind of like a weird interlude type track, which sounds like it could have come off of the Weeknd album. So I'll say I highly recommend Tsunami Sea, because I really did enjoy this, and a lot more than I was expecting to. I was worried that I wouldn't enjoy it at all, but even still, you know, it is what it is, right? I don't love Spiritbox, but this album kind of similar to the Whitechapel album for me, in that a lot of the songs on here could have been standout tracks for me. But alas, I had to, you know, consolidate and actually pick only about half of the songs to be my actual favorites. So you have some pretty dynamic moments at the very end of the album. Crystal Roses is an interesting interlude, even though I don't like it. Last couple songs making up the end are really great. The first couple songs are a little bit rockier for me personally, but like the whole middle section, there's a train of several tracks that are just really, really good back to back. I did actually really enjoy Tsunami Sea. Let me actually go ahead and refresh this and find my review of it down here somewhere, wherever that's going to be. I don't even know. Can I find my review in here? There it is, and then I will do review this album again real quick with the 4 out of 5 stars, and say I did that today with a re-listen, because I re-listened to it again this morning. So I'll mark both of those in there today because I can't. The next other release for the week is more of a re-release. It's a deluxe version of an album, that being of The Black by Imminence. So the Return of the Black is what we're talking about this time around. And while I didn't fully get the hype of The Black the first time around when it released last year, I did enjoy it for what it was. Imminence isn't my favorite band in the world. I think their 2019 album is probably better than The Black is. I haven't listened to it recently enough to say, but I'm glad that they're getting the attention that they deserve. If nothing else, in regards to the Return of the Black, it did make me see the hype a little bit more, and I found this to be a little bit of an interesting deluxe version, as opposed to most deluxe albums where you'll have like bonus tracks, remixes, live versions, whatever at the very end, and like that's all it does, just tack on extra stuff to the end of the album. I appreciate and respect that Imminence did kind of like what Trivium did with In Waves, in that a couple of the bonus tracks are actually intermixed in the album. God-Fearing Man was not the original opener. Death Shall Have No Dominion was not originally in this part of the album. And then after the actual closer of Le Noir, you have a few remixes, which I skipped because I don't listen to remixes on deluxe versions of albums. Just make it its own thing. I don't want that on my deluxe albums. This second closer, I would say, of what this last track is, it's nearly 9 minutes long, and although it doesn't actually do that much, it's more like a second closer, second epilogue to Le Noir. It wraps up the whole sound of the album in a way that I did really appreciate. So even though I don't love The Black, it's not my favorite thing in the world, I really respected what these guys did here, and so I recommend The Return of the Black. I'm actually going to put in parentheses here, even if you weren't hot on the, let's say, standard edition, or maybe instead of saying even if, let's say just if, because that would be kind of the placement that I was at, where I enjoyed it. I think it made honorable mentions for my 2024 album of the year, but the end product didn't end up being something that I adored as much as everybody else. So yeah, my standout tracks are going to include that intro. God-Fearing Man is a much better intro than whatever the actual intro song is called. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. What is it? Come Hell or High Water. Don't enjoy Come Hell or High Water, actually. I think it's a really repetitive and boring song, especially after God-Fearing Man, which is much more dynamic and interesting. So you have those. Beyond the Pale was my favorite, and then the title track was the other standout. So yeah, I enjoyed The Return of the Black, but it's not one that I'm going to return to very much unless I'm specifically in an Imminence mood. Although I think what I'll probably end up doing is making an amalgamation playlist where I incorporate the original track listing on here, but use the original versions, not including features of these other songs, because that was the other thing about the deluxe that they did that was interesting, was all of the features ended up on this version, whereas the standard edition don't have those features. I'd probably keep Come What May with the Neobliviscaris feature, though, because that feature actually sounds really great in here. The rest of them don't really change much of the songs, in my opinion. I would take off the remixes and then keep like the original versions of most of the songs and like call that my version of the black and listen to that sometimes. Overall, it's solid. You know, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed the black the first time, I think. But I'd probably end up having rated them the same. Even so, that is my opinion of Return of the Black. But now we are done with the new album releases for the week. Let's talk about the EP that released this week, being Crown Magnetar's Punishment. I've never listened to this band before in my life. I've seen hype for them several times. I should go back and listen to a couple of their previous albums because I've seen a lot of hype for that kind of stuff. Actually, you know, I may have listened to Everything Bleeds. I don't remember. I think I might have actually listened to that in 2023 and not really liked it very much. I don't remember. So I could totally be just making that entire thing up. I think Punishment is an okay EP. I'm glad that it doesn't run very long because there's not a whole ton of interesting dynamic stuff going on here. It's good for what it is, standard deathcore, but it's not anything super memorable to me. So I would say I recommend Punishment, but it's not necessarily a particularly huge recommend. Oh crap, that's not what I wanted to do. Copy and paste like I'm supposed to. Standout tracks. If I could type properly, that'd be nice. I think Bringer of Deadlight was the only one of the songs that I would say actually stood out as kind of a favorite. Overall, the sound just kind of blended together the whole way through. I think it's good. I think it's fine, but not particularly special. But that means that we're going to move now into the singles for the week, and there are several of these to talk about. First, we will discuss Incomplete by Within Destruction, which was a very different song than I was expecting. I really liked Cybergirl. I don't remember listening to the first two singles very much. Looking forward to when these guys actually drop their album here in not too long. If they release any more singles after this one, I'm not going to end up listening to those. I would say Incomplete, I'll probably give like 3.5. I think it's a good, like, interesting song. Let's see, I listened to this on the 6th, actually. I think it's interesting. I really like the inclusion of the clean vocals on this one. Very different than I guess I was expecting for them to sound. I don't ever put things on singles, so we'll just call that good. I enjoyed Incomplete, but I'm looking forward to an album at the end of the day is the main thing that I'm looking forward to here. Next up was Ulterior Motive by Lunarite. I talked about these guys just a couple weeks back when they did another single, or I don't know if it's one guy or not. This single is much better than the last one. I don't remember what I rated the last one. I think it might have been like 2.5 stars or something. Ulterior Motive is much better. Solid single, not a new favorite or anything, but as far as instrumental, like the sort of genty type of thing goes, I think it's pretty solid. Living in Tragedy by Nightmares. It's a surprise single drop. I wasn't expecting it, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think they're not necessarily the most special metalcore out there, but I think they're solid enough. If you just enjoy metalcore as a rule, there's no reason why you shouldn't check out the single. Parasite by Wolves at the Gate was a little bit disappointing. I didn't dislike it, but it didn't really stand out to me the way that, like, say, their 2019 album did, when that was a huge surprise record that made it onto my album of the year list that year. I don't think their 2022 album made it onto my list in really any notable capacity. So these guys are pretty hit or miss for me. I generally enjoy their style, but not necessarily my favorite out there. Sentinel Hill by Mavis was a little bit more of a surprise for me. I did enjoy this one quite a bit. Again, it's not necessarily anything too unique when it comes to core. If you're expecting things to be super new or unique, you're not really going to get that. But I thought Sentinel Hill was solid nonetheless. Waiting was also a great single by Barry Tomorrow. I would probably put this on like the same level as Let Go. Problem is, I don't remember what I rated Let Go off the top of my head, so I'm just going to put it at like that average 3.5 stars. It might be 4 stars though. These two singles were both really good and have me actually excited for these guys' upcoming album. Really looking forward to that. I think that comes out in May, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken on that. Next up, we're going to move into my personal listens. I guess that's all the singles for the week. Pathway to the Moon by Unrequited was an album I listened to kind of on the sort of recommendation of a couple other people on Musicboard that I've seen. I was expecting this to be a little bit more than it was. I was expecting it to be heavier. I was expecting it to be a little bit more dynamic. But if you're in for a really vibey type of listen, a very vibey, it's not even really like prog metal. It's got a progressive type of thing, and there are a couple of like heavier moments, but it's a lot more like the softer vibes of it is a lot of what this ends up being at the end of the day. I'll say I recommend A Pathway to the Moon, but I was expecting this to be a lot more than it was. But it's not necessarily a dig. I think if I went into this again, if I were to re-listen to this now, you know, knowing what it is, I would probably enjoy it a lot more this time around. I think it's okay. It's not a bad album by any means. It's just different than what I was thinking it was going to be. And as we all know, those kinds of things can make something seem worse than it actually is. So I might re-listen to this one again a little bit later in the year with expectations a little bit shifted for that. So we'll call that good. Otherwise, the only other thing that I really listened to outside of the new releases this week was a re-listen to Picture Core. Here's my original review that I wrote for this. Really enjoyed this. I guess I could actually edit this and take out the bracket after this favorite song here because I don't need it. Basically, my opinion stands on this. I should probably take this down to a 4 out of 5 instead of 4.5 out of 5 because it still wasn't quite breaking that threshold, even though I know it will eventually. It's kind of a weird way that I'm choosing to rate this, but that's okay. I already put the review this album again thing on here earlier. I listened to it on the 3rd. That's all well and good. And that's all of my listening for this week. Beyond all of that stuff, I do really want to re-listen to Whitechapel again. I re-listened to Tsunami Sea again this morning, like I kind of talked about. I intended to do Whitechapel again, but I kind of ran out of time, so I'm not doing that yet. But I really want to. It's not often where I listen to these new releases by bands who I follow or whatever, and I want to go through and re-listen to them multiple times in a short period of time as soon as the album drops. But these two are definitely worthy of that quality. How much did you enjoy either Whitechapel or Spiritbox new albums? Because I thought that they were both solid. I'd be interested to hear what your opinions are as well. Thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.